right, I'm very excited to talk about direct distribution with the Peter Broderick. Peter Broderick is the president of Paradigm Consulting, which helps filmmakers and media companies develop strategies to maximize distribution, audience, and importantly, revenue. Paradigm Consulting specializes in state-of-the-art distribution techniques, from innovative theatrical service deals, hybrid video strategies, which we'll talk about, and new approaches to global distribution. He has also advised over 1,900 films. He was previously the president of Next Wave Films. They supplied finishing funds and other vital support to filmmakers and helped launch the careers of some directors you might know, like Christopher Nolan, Joe Carnahan, and Amir Barlev. I hope I pronounced that all correctly. He's also a key player in the growth of the ultra-low budget feature movement and is one of the most influential advocates of digital movie making. Peter is the expert. If you haven't heard of him, you must not be in film. You can also find his strategic thinking and writing in Scientific American, the New York Times, The Economist. He's keynoted or presented at pretty much every single film festival ever. And he also has some incredible must-read reports on distribution strategies. We're going to link to some of them, but you can also go to his Paradigm Consulting website and look for Maximizing Distribution, Welcome to the New World of Distribution, and Declaration of Independence. So all of this is why Peter is the most qualified to answer the question that we pose in this video and that we will be hyper focused on, which is, what is direct distribution or hybrid distribution? We'll get into it. So thank you, Peter, for doing this.
Well, thank you, Christy. We've known each other a long time, and this is the first time we've been on camera together, so it's good.
That's true. It's true. Yeah, I was searching my inbox to see the first time I started stalking you, and that was June of 2012. So thank you for continuing to respond to my relentless emails and phone calls.
I remember you coming to my house.
I remember it too.
First meeting of many.
You've been incredibly influential on me and everything that we built. So thank you.
Well, let's use the term hybrid distribution.
What's the definition of hybrid and how is that different?
Well, I made up the term so I can define it, hopefully pretty well. Hybrid distribution means that you're making some deals with distributors for some of your rights, and you're retaining some rights yourself. So self-distribution implies that you're out there on your own in some desert trying to make your way. And it's a pejorative term in Hollywood. It's like the last stop Texaco before the desert, you could say. Direct distribution is a newer term, but I don't know what it means because I think it's important to be not just direct, but to have partners, distribution partners, to maximize what you can do.
It's a good point. I think I've also heard the term creative distribution, direct to audience distribution. But it sounds like, in your experience, again, 1,900 films, hybrid is probably the most accurate.
Well, also, I mean, I think built into hybrid is the idea that there are partnerships. And I think that, if somebody's going to succeed in this world, they need partners of different sorts. They need a team of, to work with. And to go it alone, to be a one-man band or one-man woman band, just doesn't work.
It's really difficult to make a film by yourself. You can't be a one-person production team. Can't
Right.
hold the camera and the mic and direct. I mean, I guess some people have, but it's not the most effective. So then you have these three different categories. You've talked a little bit about control. So two questions. Well, first was, you said partners. So when you say partners, do you mean who's with you that you hire, or are these partners in distribution? And what are the varying levels of control?
Okay, well, let's start out by defining partners. It's not a legal definition, so it's not like you might have a contract with them, could have a partner that you don't have a contract with. Some of the partners are on your team, but I'm not going to call them partners. I'm just going to call them teammates. And the partners could range from distributors to nonprofit organizations to government agencies to any kind of collection of people that might be excited about what your film's about and think that being involved with your film is an opportunity for them. And once a potential partner gets this idea, wow, this could be good for us, then it's not rocket science to figure out some way to start working with them.
Got it. Okay, so it can be a range. I like that you clarified not a legal definition. always say when we talk about screening tours, check with your lawyer first to make sure you have these rights. um, okay, then talk a little bit about control. I've heard you speak about it. So what does it mean to have control over your distribution?
Well, I did a presentation at TIFF, the Toronto Film Festival, not this last year, but the year before. And the first two sentences were distribution control is as important as creative control. Now, filmmakers understand creative control, but I think they don't really think about distribution control as much as they should. And for years, filmmakers have been hiring agents, reps, and other people to give away their distribution control. So the thing that I think is going to maximize your chances of succeeding is to maintain distribution through the stages of your distribution. And that doesn't mean you can't be working with distribution partners. Certainly you can. But if you make an all rights sort of traditional deal where one company has your rights for 10 years, you will have no control. They will have 100% of the control. Their best interest is in making the company succeed, not necessarily in making your film succeed. If you have control, then the reasons that you made the film, whether it's to change the way people see the world or to make lots of money or to have the opportunity to make more movies, that's in your hands. And one of the things to understand about what I mean by control is not just you can make a strategy in the beginning and somebody else will follow it blindly. No. In these days where things are changing every 20 minutes, I want you to be able to refine your strategy as you go. So let's say the first stage of your strategy, you're going to learn what's working, what the challenges are, and then you can refine what you do next based on that information. So you're getting information all the way along. Some of that information is coming to you directly. And if you can utilize that information, then when you're done, I hope you'll look back and say, we did the best we could, rather than we made a deal with this company and we're just so disappointed.
Which we've heard a lot. And so again, to dig into control. So if by giving up control, let's say it's an all rights deal. So now the distributor has control over when, where, and how the film is distributed. Is that correct? Because as you're speaking, I'm thinking about marketing and how it's framed and what's spent.
Well, they not only have control of those things, but they have control of the windows. And control of the windows is crucial because in my idea of a sort of dynamic strategy, you do the first window and it's working really well. You can extend the window. You do the first window and it's not working well at all. You can shorten the window. And there's a sequence of windows that you need to go window by window in an order, not out of order. And so let's say you're doing educational distribution for a documentary and it's going really, really well. Well, then you might extend that to a year, 2 years, or 3 years. One film I worked on, we stayed in educational distribution for 3 years and they made $1 million in the official distribution.
My goodness.
But if somebody else is deciding on windows, or if you've agreed in advance to windows, and so this distributor gets it on January 1st, if great things happen in November and December, well, too bad, because the next window is going to undercut the window you're in. And as an example of that, educational distribution, maybe the rights are $300 or $500. You get to, TVOD and somebody's renting it for $299. So once it's available for $299, there's not a lot of $500, deals to be made educationally. And some distributors, and particularly more traditional studios, they don't think educational distribution is important. And in my experience, having worked on a lot of films, it often can be the biggest source of revenue for a documentary. And TVOD, iTunes, Amazon, how small the money can be, even for a successful film, it's amazing. It's just so little money. So you want to make sure the windows where you're making the most money come first. And then later, okay, we've made as much as we can. Let's do this next.
It makes sense. I've talked to filmmakers who they'd rather put in the effort of getting one person to book a $500 screening fee than try and get 100 people to, online to pay $4.99. It's more scattered marketing.
Right.
So that makes sense. Is there any wiggle room in that control? So have you found that distributors are more lenient? So let's say it is going well. Do you think, or is it pretty locked in no matter what?
If they see me coming, they know that I won't make a deal with them unless the filmmakers have the right to sell the film directly from their website, both digitally and on DVD to the extent that people are buying DVDs. That's like a bottom line. We're not going to give that up. And the thing about Windows is if they won't allow us to have control of Windows or approval of Windows, then we know that we're not going to maximize things. I mean, at one point, well, actually, at many points, I've done a lot of presentations around the world. And often I'll ask the audience, how many of you have been satisfied with your distribution for a film? And sometimes no hands go up, sometimes 3 hands go up, maybe 5, depending on how big the room is. So there's a lot of people that have done it traditionally that regret it. And I'm not saying hybrid distribution guarantees success. What I am saying is going to increase your odds of succeeding. One filmmaker asked me, what percentage of filmmakers you've worked with end up happy with their distribution, which was a great question. So I thought about it for about 10 seconds and I said, I think 3% would be a big number. And the others, 97% are somewhere between apoplectic and mildly dissatisfied. So I think people really need to be clear about their goals to start with. And a lot of times I'll ask filmmakers before I agree to consult with them, what's the most important goal for you? Is it making the most revenue? Is it, having an impact on the world? Is helping you with your career? And they'll say, oh, we want to do all those things. I'm like, okay, all those things are fine, but I still need you to rank them. Tell me what's most important. And once you understand what's most important, then you can design a strategy that's customized to the film and your goals. And that's important. But people need to kind of find the right balance between optimism and realism. Now that's hard.
It's tough, but you need that level of optimism and drive to get you through the production, to get you through the fundraising. Without it, it becomes difficult. At the same time, can't be blind optimism.
Yeah. So just going back to your question, in the early 90s, when feature filmmakers started to make movies for ultra low budgets, like Clerks and El Mariachi was $8,000, Clerks was $27,000. Chris Nolan's following was $12,000. So in that situation, if they could write a script based on the resources that they already had, they weren't going around years hat in hand trying to find somebody to finance their movie. Well, then they had control. Nobody could stop them from making the movie. Then we moved forward to digital filmmaking when finally filmmakers can own the means of production, digital camera and a computer. Nobody could stop them from making a movie. And when we got to digital distribution, now, amazingly, nobody can stop filmmakers from making their films available globally. And a number of films I've worked on have succeeded globally in just amazing ways. And there were no distributors involved. So I'm not saying don't work with distributors, but I do think that they need to be part of the process, but not, controlling it.
I think often when we talk about, this type of hybrid distribution, it's not dissing distributors in general. It's just helping filmmakers prepare and make a plan that makes sense for them. And there's some distributors who specialize in certain areas that might be the right partner, whether it's the right education distributor or the right theatrical distributor. They get, again, and the more control you have over your release, if you've raised money to support your own team in doing your own release, the more opportunities and autonomy you have in deciding if you want to take that offer from that distributor, to my understanding.
And a lot of distributors are kind of stuck in the past. They're kind of looking backwards to that success 6 years ago that you can't duplicate because things have changed so much now. So I think if they say, well, we're going to work with this film, we're going to try some new things. If those things work well, we'll do them for other films we're going to distribute. So they're kind of open to, innovation and, trying some things. I think that's a great attitude. But if they say, no, there's only one way to do things, and you already know that way is kind of broken, then that's not a good partner.
That's a good point. I have a question about rights. So often it's about how you when I first, learned about this and was learning from you years ago, it was about splitting your rights and certain ones you can maintain. Are these rights entirely made up? How legal are they? And for example, I just talked to a filmmaker who has carved out what's called their DEI rights. So any sort of screening event that is considered a DEI screening, they can have the full revenue from. But education, faith, other non-theatrical goes with their distributor. Can you make up rights like that? in your contract?
Well, sometimes when you define rights, it gets a little subjective. You know,
Hmm.
what would be a DEI right as opposed to is this one or is that not? And I think when you have a contract, you try to come up with definitions that are concrete and not open for discussion or argument or, subjectivity. I think that when you think of what rights you want to keep and what rights you want to give away, you probably have not distributed movies yourselves theatrically before. So if there's a company that's good at that, you might be able to hire them and do what's called a service deal. So they're not getting control of the movie. They're just hired to get a movie in movie theaters. A lot of filmmakers work that way. And so they don't need to make an all rights deal to be in movie theaters because that's an option. When it comes to educational distribution, there's a lot of good educational distributors. They have mailing lists. They have other films that are like your film they've distributed before. Okay, so that works. That's a good partner. So when you make a deal with a distributor, what I want you to do is only give them the rights they're good at, not the rights they don't care about, not the rights they're poor at, only what they're good at. And I mean, that seems like obvious, but it's not normal. I mean, so often distributors will say, no, we need all those rights, even though we know that they have no intention of using them all. And I don't want any rights to get wasted. So
Hmm.
I'm sure we have all the rights covered, some of which the filmmakers will handle or complement the efforts of the distributor in those areas, and others the distributor will, do a really good job for. And that's why I come back to the idea of partnerships. And sometimes your partners aren't financial partners and they're not distribution partners. They're just partners that can spread the word about your movie. They have a big membership, they have a lot of employees. They have,
Email list and network. Yes. Yeah.
and the first challenge of every independent film is getting to a critical level of awareness. So if you have partners that can help you do that, then you got a shot. If you don't get to a critical level of awareness, you're not going to maximize things. And you want win-win relationships with partners where they're going to benefit just like you're going to benefit. And when they see the opportunity to use your film to help accomplish their goals, then good things can happen.
I agree. So part of that is also understanding your audience and why. So why is this film going to help you reach your goals? Why is this going to help continue a conversation or build community or get people in your brick and mortar store? And
Right.
so it's really, there's so many elements that we were asking filmmakers to know. So it's helpful to have you in their corner, and hopefully some of this stuff will be helpful to them. And you've also, again, 1900 films. I'm not even sure if I've seen 1900 films, and you've worked on 1900 films. It's incredible. But you've also, you just said technology is changing every 20 minutes. You've seen it from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray to streaming, and you've worked with filmmakers at different stages. And so I'm curious, are there any major trends or themes or core principles or things that will carry us through to the next wave of technology?
Well, I think the area of great opportunity is global distribution. So in the past, you'd make a deal with a foreign sales company, and then they would try to make deals in, a lot of countries, a lot of territories. These days, if they make a deal in three or four territories, they consider that a success. When in the world, there are 252 countries and territories. So if 3 out of 252, that doesn't
It's a
sound
small
like.
percentage.
And so this is how technology has enabled filmmakers to have a worldwide reach. So now the challenge is, how do you create awareness? How to use partners to spread the word? But I'll just mention really quickly one film, which is called The Wisdom of Trauma, which is a documentary on trauma. And they spent 3.5 years making the movie. And then they decided they'd do an online summit on trauma for 7 days, leading authorities on trauma from around the world. And they were going to make their film available by donation. In the first 7 days, there were 4 million views, which is probably 6 million people. When they were all done, they reached 232 territories out of 252, which is probably more than any film documentary has ever done. And there was no distributor involved. So I'm not saying that you can duplicate exactly what they did, but I think it shows the possibilities now which weren't there before.
They also, because you published a case study on that, which is incredibly helpful. So thank you for generously donating that time and research to the community at large. They had a thoughtful rollout. They were in control of their distribution, and they hit that critical mass, I think, that you were talking about. They did the if I remember correctly, conferences or summits leading up to, so before the digital release.
They did Facebook ads, and they had partnerships with organizations that became affiliates later, but that spread the word to all their members. And the movie went viral, I think, in 24 hours because people who saw the movie liked it so much. And because it was by donation, people could see the movie instantly. They didn't have to wait to have an opportunity. They could pay $20, which was the recommended donation. They could pay more, and then they got all these other materials, or they could pay zero and still see the movie. So what happened was a lot of people, I think only 2.5% of people actually donated, and the others saw it for free. But the people that saw it for free spread the word to other people, and that just created, this viral sensation. So that's not possible.
There's a concept, right, to get your first 1,000 fans. If you get 1,000 paying fans, whether it's your Substack or for your film, that's kind of the tipping point to success. What's interesting is I met those filmmakers because of you, and they have a film on Kinema, and they're doing very, very well. And part of it is they did have a strong base of emails to go to. So when they launched, they were clear in their message. They did have very approachable pricing, and it was only for screenings. But they've done, I can't share their numbers, you probably know them, but I think they've done over 800 screening events in the last couple months. They've done well. They had a base, and this film was also on theme with their past film. So I think they're also a good example of how do you take success from one film and carry it over to the next project as you grow.
And I think when filmmakers think of control and control of their career, how to be sustainable, building a core audience around themselves and their work is so important. So if a big distributor's doing your distribution, you're not going to have access to that audience. When you're involved, then you can have direct access to those people, and you're going to learn a lot from them, and they're going to spread the word about you and your films, which is, super valuable.
It's incredibly valuable. So I guess if you had one thing, I'm sure you have many things, is there one thing that every filmmaker needs to know as they're approaching distribution?
I think that they need to understand the importance of control and not agree to a traditional deal where some, distributors, sings the praises of the movies and say they'll take them to the moon. They make a deal and then they have no control of their movie for 5 or 10 years. And at the end of 5 or 10 years, it's too late to do anything. So I think if a bottom line is to keep some measure of control and to work with partners, then I think they've got a fighting chance.
Right. Before we head out, how can people find you online?
Well, it's pretty easy. PeterBroderick.com is the website, and the case study of the wisdom of trauma is there. I have a distribution bulletin, and if people come to the website, they can sign up. We have 9,500 filmmakers around the world getting it. It's free. And when something good happens in independent distribution, I'll write a case study about it. That may only be 2 or 3 times a year, but still, there's a lot there. I think I've done 50 bulletins, or 51 by now.
Oh, wow. I've been following it for at least since 2012. So in 12 years, 50 bulletins. Yeah, that's just a couple times a year. All right. So PeterBroderick.com, sign up for the bulletins. I highly recommend them. And anything else you want to add before we end?
Well, and if people want to get in touch with me, it's peter@peterbroderick.com. And if they're interested in me consulting on their film, there's a filmmaker form they can fill out and submit it. It's very simple and straightforward. So I look forward to meeting more filmmakers.
Perfect. And we'll put those links in the video description so it's easy to find. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
This was fun. Thank you, Christy.
Thanks. All right. I'm excited to chat with Pulkit Datta. He is a New York-based producer, director, film programmer. He has worked on a wide range of scripted films, documentaries, commercials, short films, music videos, and multimedia campaigns. You might know his films, Israelism. These are 2 feature documentaries, Israelism and Invisible. He also has done a gun violence themed short called Do We Belong, which was on the IDA shortlist, Doc Award shortlist in 2018. And if you don't know of him yet, then you certainly will from his upcoming climate activism doc series called Versus Goliath, coming soon. And we are going to go deep and chat about direct distribution, and partially because I've seen firsthand how Pulkit has done this directly. So hi, welcome.
Pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Right. As you know, we're going to dive deep into direct distribution versus self-distribution. So my first question for you is, as someone who has successfully overseen the releases of multiple films, two of which I got to see firsthand and close up, and how successful you were, what exactly is direct distribution or hybrid distribution or self-distribution? How do you define it? How are they similar or different?
That's a really good question. And I think we're in the middle of a time where we're trying to figure out what all these terms mean. So for me and my projects, I see self-distribution or creative distribution as taking control of the destiny of your project in the simplest way possible. And what that meant for my teams and my projects was, let's figure out how to get our films directly to our audiences outside of the traditional conventional systems of distribution.
And when did you decide to do that? Was that something at the production stage you wanted to plan for? Was it after festivals? When did you make that choice?
So I can talk about the two films that we have on Kinema. The first one is Invisible. That film, we actually had a more traditional path in mind. We were trying to get into festivals, trying to land traditional distribution. None of that was happening, and it was a very difficult topic for, I guess, the industry to latch onto. So it was kind of a need that we had to just figure out our own way of doing it. With Israelism, we did plan a bit of that beforehand. While we were in post, we started thinking about, where is this film going to go? What are unique and interesting ways of getting it to the audience? It could be in combination with more conventional ways of getting the film out there, but we definitely knew we wanted to do something different.
And you also, when you say we, what does that team look like for either one of those films? Is it, when I hear, people hear self-distribution, you think only by yourself, but it sounds like you had a team.
We did. I was fortunate to have teams on both projects. With Invisible, it was a very small team of 4 of us doing a lot of the heavy lifting by ourselves, but we were kind of taking turns delegating amongst us on who would be focusing on which part of it. With Israelism, we were fortunate to have a bit more funding resources and more donations and grants coming in. So we were able to hire a few people that were dedicated to the project. So we did hire, for example, people on a part-time basis who would be running social media and outreach and marketing. So that was a slightly bigger team, but still a small team.
So then if you could have added anyone else to your team to kind of, in order to have control over your distribution and oversee this in the full effect, was there anyone else you would have wanted to have on your teams?
I think looking back, neither of the films had a dedicated publicist. And that was actually an intentional choice we made when we started, partially due to lack of funding resources on both projects, but we thought we could figure out different ways of getting the film out there ourselves. If we had more time and resources, we would have loved to have a dedicated publicist, marketing person who just knew exactly what that whole business is like. And doing that all the time. That would be great.
That's fair. Actually, and from what I've seen from Israelism, you guys did have a lot of success in national press too. So even without having someone full time, it was still pretty impressive what you all did.
Thank you. I mean, I think with Israelism, what was also what worked in our favor was the topic was very much in the news, and so we had to figure out strategic and also very sensitive ways of working with what's going on and kind of contributing to the conversations ongoing in the news and social media. So a lot of our press ended up coming from news media rather than film media. And that was a clear difference that we saw with this project. And a lot of our audience came to Kinema and other platforms to watch the film from articles that were in the news media mentioning the film. So that was a really interesting learning for us.
Yeah, it makes sense. You guys, we were also very active on your email list. You're active on your social. You seem to be responding to things that were happening in real time in the news. So from my understanding of when you were in control of your distribution and your marketing, you had the flexibility to be able to do so. You were able to take an article that was in USA Today, turn it into a social post and get it up immediately and help amplify all the press that you were getting. Does that sound correct?
Absolutely. I mean, we are still doing that on the Israelism film. We assess kind of what's going on in the news, who's mentioning the film, or even just what's happening generally in the topic area. And then we respond immediately. So we've been pivoting constantly. And I think that was also one of the tricks to making it successful and making sure people see it, is you have to stay current and you have to keep adapting to what's going on around you. So the strategy has to be flexible.
Okay, perfect. I was just going to ask that too. So it sounds like you had a strategy, but you had to adapt. So what having done this now, to at least two films that I got to see up close, what's your kind of biggest advice for filmmakers looking to put together a direct distribution strategy?
I would say a few things. First of all, stay flexible. That is incredibly valuable as a filmmaker doing this independently in direct distribution. You have to be able to pivot and adapt based on how things are changing, how people are responding or not responding. We've done that with Israelism repeatedly, where we would see if certain things weren't working that we were putting out there, and then we would pivot and change and then test it out. The other thing I would say is, people say they have a plan A, then a plan B, and a plan C. It's fine to have multiple plans, but do them all at the same time, which sounds daunting. But the reason I'm saying that is I think most people's plan A is we'll go to a festival, we'll launch from there, we'll do more of the conventional things. And then plan B is we'll do screenings, direct screenings, or VOD and things like that, or virtual screenings. What we learned was doing all of this at the same time actually multiplied our audience. So we didn't have to wait for windows to do it.
That's interesting because I hear another strategy is to window out, like, be selective, limit supply because you want to get audiences to pay the most amount of money who will the earliest, but, hold out on AVOD or any of the free options till the very end. So do you think you would have collapsed your AVOD and brought that up earlier?
Not the AVOD. I think in terms of limiting demand, we did do that in the early stages because we wanted to build as much of an audience and mailing list as we could, right? So we did do these kind of FOMO screenings where if you don't watch it now, you'll miss it, and then you sign up to hear about the next one. So we did several of those, which worked really well. I guess what I meant by kind of doing all these things at the same time was we were still doing festivals and we were doing these sort of FOMO screenings virtually at the same time, and then building up to an eventual TVOD and then AVOD. So I don't think I would collapse the AVOD. I think it makes sense to have it later. But I think the conventional notion of, you have to wait for the entire festival cycle to be done, which takes a year, 18 months or more, and then you do everything else. We kind of challenge all of those rules and it worked.
I think you did. Yes, you did like some artificial scarcity creation at the beginning through those virtual screenings. And you guys were responding to demand on both sides. You were getting pulled into some festivals. They were reconsidering if the film was there for the right time. But I think what I saw firsthand was exactly what you said, how flexible you guys were. You responded quickly, and that's very cool to hear.
Once you start achieving success with these sort of alternate strategies, you also realize that you can have these conversations with festivals and other partners to figure out compromises in situations. So, for example, we were available online. We were doing virtual screenings, which people would think would disqualify us from festivals, right? But it didn't, because we would have conversations with programmers saying, listen, this is why we're doing these limited virtual screenings, but I don't think it's going to affect your festival audience. And once we convinced them of that and had that conversation, they programmed it, they screened it, and they realized it didn't affect anything. It worked. It worked for everyone.
I feel like it's a common myth in our industry that if the film's online at all or too much, then no one will see it in the theater. Well, there's so much stuff on. Like, people are not going to the theater just for the film. They're going to watch in community. They're going for the experience, to be a part of the festival. There are many films, and I do the same. It's online, but I don't want to watch it on my computer at home. I prefer to watch it on the big screen. So it's great to hear that you guys had success in that, because it's helpful for everyone else in the industry to be able to make the case that the film should still be in a theater, should still be in a film festival, even if it's done some online events. So that's awesome. All right, last bit, just any piece of advice. There's one more thing. I know you gave some guidance here. If there's one thing you would do differently, advice you'd give, or the one piece that like a filmmaker absolutely has to know if they're about to enter this space, what would you tell them?
I'll say two things, but they're connected. Okay. Number one is plan as early as possible. With these two films, Invisible, we had to pivot at the end of it when we realized we weren't getting into festivals and such. Israelism, we started in the post-production process. For the next project, I'm starting even earlier.
Wow.
While with Versus Goliath, for example, the climate series.
Yeah.
While we were in production, we started talking about where is this going to go, right? So I think that's key, absolutely key. Like, start as early as possible. I think budgeting for and planning for distribution needs to happen at the beginning of the project while you're figuring out how to make the project. So that's really important. The other thing I would say is know your audience. That is the other really, really important piece of advice I wish every filmmaker would adopt immediately is, it's very easy for filmmakers to say, I want the entire world to watch my film, which we all do. We obviously want everyone to watch it. Start as hyper specific as you can about who are the core demographics or people that are going to watch your film first, and really figure out how to get to them and get them excited. And then you can build from there. You can have primary audience, secondary, tertiary, and keep building from there for sure. Know your audience.
I think you were dead on. You gave a presentation at Doc NYC that I only got to see the first part of because I had to take a workflow call, but it was so helpful. You hit a bunch of these points, and I think you're so dead on. And hopefully we will dive into some of those topics later in this series.
Yeah.
Where can everyone find you online if they want to learn more about what you're working on?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram. My full name, Pulkit Datta, on both. For Israelism, we have a website, israelismfilm.com, and Israelism the Film on Instagram. You can follow that project as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And that's our episode. Thank you to our special guest, our producer and editor, Ron Pissarro, and you, the filmmakers, creators, marketers, and distributors that are dedicated to connecting audiences with great films.